Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and you find me in sunny North London. Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and today you find me in sunny Norfolk. Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and you find us in beautiful downtown Hollywood, Los Angeles. Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, and actually you really find me in the car park of AKA Designs in North London. I am joining my old buddy, old pal, Ben Nemes. Good to see you, sir.
You too, James. Thanks for coming up. Hello, everyone.
Now, there is a reason for that slightly elongated intro, isn't there?
There is.
And actually, your rather lovely attire.
Well, thank you. Very kind of you to say.
A little while ago on Pro Tools Expert, we announced this kind of innovative idea by a group of chaps, of which this man is one, called Space Crate.
Indeed.
And we were all very excited about Space Crate.
You were, thank you.
So guess where we're sitting? We are actually inside the very first Space Crate.
Here we are. I'm thinking, is this the first time you've done a video where you're actually inside the product?
Do you know what? I think that actually might be the case.
It's a thing, though, isn't
I
it?
like that.
It's a thing.
I like firsts.
You could get a little endoscope camera and start poking it into interfaces and consoles in the future.
Consoles, yes. Anyway, I can see where this is going. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see it in the flesh, as it were.
Thank you for coming.
Tell us a little bit about, for those who didn't catch the initial article and things like that, tell us a little bit about the idea for Space Crate and actually what we are in.
Well, there's a who, a what, a why, and a where to all this, I guess. So if we start with the what, as you approached this morning, you can't have failed to notice that what you're sitting in is a new, resprayed, but otherwise unadulterated 20-foot ISO standard marine shipping container.
As in the sort of thing we see on the back of trucks and container ships the world over, quite literally.
And goods trains and lorries, and increasingly, I guess, you'll see them as site offices on construction sites. You'll see them as kind of promotional items. There's container architecture as a growing thing. So yeah, exactly.
Becoming very trendy for market stalls and...
It could be a pop-up falafel bar in the hipster part of town. Indeed. I mean, there's more and more of that cargo texture, as they're calling it, going on.
I like that.
What's more apparent, I guess, as you cross the threshold and come in, is what you're in is a professional spec creative space. It's a studio. And our aim, of course, is to take the useful attributes of both of those things. So in the case of a container, something that's born to move around, to be strong and cheap and easy to get around the world, with the useful attributes of a studio, which is somewhere you can go and work on stuff for money.
We like that.
Yeah, quite. And in so doing, try and mess with some of the dynamic about what, where, how, when you can go and do those things for customers. So that's the what and some of the why. The idea came about, I guess, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's a kind of a fun idea. So maybe it was a thing we came up with in a pub at some point and thought,
on the back of the metaphorical fag packet.
A studio, right? But like in a container. But actually, it's a lot more boring than that. It's based on my time and my business partners, Guy and Mike, their time spent talking to customers over the last collectively 70 years about what's changing and about how people can make a living and make money in the content creation business and how all that's changing and the need to be so much more flexible about where you do things, how you do things, and when you do things. And it's that kind of cold, hard economics, if you like, that really got us to here, rather than wouldn't it be fun, which it has been, but that's not why we did it.
So we are in a shipping container.
We are.
There is no two ways about it. That's what it is on the outside. It's what it says on the tin or on the nice plaque label thing. I suspect, having been inside one of their containers before, it's not the most acoustically friendly environment in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people have asked me, is a shipping container a bad acoustic environment? And the answer is no. No, it's a lot worse than that. And you don't have to have done it. You can imagine. It's a
big steel-sided, flat, corrugated in a lot of it, presumably.
I mean, acoustically, I guess you'd say I wouldn't start from here.
Right.
If given the choice.
If I could start from anywhere, it wouldn't be from here.
No, indeed. It's left to its own devices in its bare form, no. But that's a big part of what we had to achieve to get to this.
So we've obviously lost some width and some height and some. We're not going to talk about girth, I promise.
Length?
Length.
Same problem then.
Whichever way we go from here, it's all messy, isn't it? Moving on quickly. So we're in an environment that sounds really rather pleasant. We've been listening to some tunes, and it is actually blowing a gale outside today, and you wouldn't know.
No.
Certainly not from in here. It sounds really rather nice. It doesn't have that kind of dry as a bone, sort of dry as a chip kind of anechoicness to it. There is a really nice. One doesn't want to use the word ambience because that infers reverb tails and things like that. But I'm assuming there was quite a lot of science and number crunching that went into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to take credit for all of that, but I can't. We worked with a bunch of guys in the acoustic side of it. I mean, we start off with the isolation. So the two things are often lumped together, but they're of course very separate. But there's a link. So if you do a really good job of your isolation, you give yourself a much harder job with acoustics, because if it's not wafting out of the room, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out where it is and wrestle it to the ground and make it behave itself. So we had the first job was an isolation shell so that we could have this environment be isolated from the outside.
So if you have got, and we'll come on to the idea of where this thing's going to be popping up or dropped off perhaps.
Yeah.
So if you have got Iron Maiden recording on the main stage at Glastonbury, you're not going to hear them in here.
No, indeed. Well, we are in an industrial environment now. We didn't have the chance to build this indoors in the nice, dry, quiet environment. We built it in a car park. The good side of that was we went through a summer and a winter, and we've got trucks and trains and helicopters, and we're actually in the car park that's shared with a drama school, a performing arts school, and they
can be quite loud.
And they haven't got air conditioning. So in the summer, they've got the windows open, and it's full-on West Side Story all day, but we don't hear it, which is good. So isolation's the first part. So when you've done that, you can then look at what you've got in the way of acoustics. Now, we didn't do that ourselves. We were lucky enough through our careers to have worked with lots of acousticians who got in touch.
Because we first met through the great and the good that is Avid.
Indeed, we did, yes.
As many of our brethren have that we now
Of
work
course.
with in various other companies all have.
We are alumni.
We've all been through the process.
Indeed, and at the other side. And now, through that part of my career and the part before it of working in Soho mainly, equipping post-production and music studios, I'd got to know a lot of both Guy and Mike, of course, and some acousticians, one of whom, Howard Turner, got in touch. He runs a company called Studio Wizard, and he got in touch early on and said, that's a really interesting idea, and he offered to come and talk to us and help us and work on it a bit with us, as did a company called Level Acoustic Design. So Chris Walls and Tim Coombs, they've just done Abbey Road, they've just done the Atmos room at Goldcrest and at Halo here in London, and they helped us out with it as well. So it wasn't left to us to do the physics and learn 0 to 100 about acoustics straight away, because we had some of the finest minds in the business on our side.
Concentrate on what you know, and if you don't know it, get someone in who does.
Well, that's really the thing. I mean, when I first had the idea and I sat down with Guy Wilson and Mike Watson, who are my partners in the business, it was, how can we make something that looks and feels and works like the kind of studio you're used to spending time in? And Guy really is, he makes things that you go into and feel right.
And you go, wow.
And you go, wow. Yeah. So I spoke to Guy about it early on, and he got it instantly. And Mike is an ex-BBC trained broadcast engineer.
Right.
Who was then a chief engineer at a Soho post house, and more recently has been running his own wiring and integration company. So that's how things clunk together, how things work, how well is it put together. And I wanted to achieve that absolute top-end studio level of fit, finish and function, and just bake it into a product that I can make available. So you ordinarily, I suppose, if you're doing a small room, you should, but you probably wouldn't get Guy and Mike and Chris and Tim and Howard involved in your build, because that would be somewhat overkill.
Yes.
But we have.
We're in a let's face it, it is quite a small space. Mm-hmm. What are we, two
2 by about 4 meters that's left in this interior space.
Right.
Yeah.
But obviously the original thing was 20 foot by, I can't really...
Yeah, so 6 meters or 20 foot by just over 8.
Right. So it's quite a you've lost a lot, but actually what I think you've gained is a very, very usable space.
Yeah.
So when people either order one, they get on the phone and say, "Hi Ben, I'd really like one of them Space Crate things." Are you at that stage yet? I mean, this is obviously Genesis. This is the first one. Are you at a stage where the phone is ringing off the hook, or obviously that's the ideal scenario?
Yeah, well, we've got to the point now where this is finished. Everything up to now has been the process of designing it, trying things out, throwing things away, starting again, and getting to something that we are happy with and that does the job. So we are now at that stage. This is kind of day one, if you like. We have certain customers who want to have one, and we have certain customers who want to hire one, and we're talking to some hire companies about offering it out to hire via hire companies.
See, I think that's where it makes sense to have, have something like this available. Have a stack of these available at Glastonbury as remote studio spaces.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the nature of it is, what if we could do something temporary? What if we need to be here for this album, this series, this project, this concert, this festival, this sporting event? They're all transient. They will take some time, and you might want to put creative capacity on that job. So that lends itself to hire, of course.
So obviously the shipping container is a worldwide standard, but why not a porter cabin, slightly bigger or slightly longer, a bigger frame size? Well,
the container is one of those standards that rarely comes along. Even things like USB, for example. Which sort of USB?
Yeah.
This is more like MIDI, I suppose, in that you know what size it is because it's never changed, and everyone agreed on it straight away back in the 50s. So the infrastructure and the apparatus for moving these around the world, that groundwork is laid, it exists, and it's commoditized, and it's inexpensive, and it's easy. Now, the minute you deviate from the path, and we've looked at some wider structures that are steel building structures that are container-ish. They're corrugated steel with corner castings, but officially they're not containers because they're a little bit wider. And the minute you deviate outside the container specs, you start having to do, in the UK, for example, I think you have to give the police 72 hours notice that you're putting it on the road. And even then, at certain times, you can't.
Right.
And then as you get wider and wider and wider, you start needing flashing lights or outriders. And I think it takes away so much of the convenience of just knowing this is easy to make a phone call to anybody.
I could get on the phone and say, I need a Space Crate in Glasgow. Can you ship it? Can you stick it on the back of a truck?
Yeah.
And presumably this is because it's containerable. You've not added more weight than a container is built to.
No, they can take, I think, 30 tons. We've not gone that far.
No, but then if you've got one of those trucks with the container hoist on, the truck itself could be the thing that drops it off.
Yes, indeed. So in the UK, we tend to use these things called high-ab trucks, which is a flatbed truck with you've seen it kind of all, it's a lifting arm that concertina's up.
Itself,
exactly. So you see them around everywhere. Yeah. And that's in the US, for example, there are some side loading trucks. I think you can tow these in the US as well. There's a trailer you can buy with the corner posts.
Wow.
Which would be great. But in the UK, it's all high-ab trucks. So they'll drive up alongside or perpendicular, pick it up, and lower it onto the ground. That, from the back of the truck to the ground, is 90 seconds, 2 minutes.
Right. So realistically, if you said to hire company or to yourselves, I want one, for example, this is where I came to you originally and said, look, I'm probably going to have to move house fairly shortly, or in the next year or 3.
Well, everyone does.
Yes, year 3, 5, 16, who knows. Now, I don't, but personally, I would think for my studio, I probably need more space. But also, the day I move house, I need to start working again, and I'm not prepared to knock down the current shed and take it with me because that's just messy. So, could you imagine being able to drop one of these onto? Well, what provision does it need?
Hard standing and level. Level because, well, one, if you're inside it and it isn't level, and you've got
roll along seats.
If you've got wheels on your chair, you're just in the wall all the time. Hard standing and level, so the door's open and it's not on marshland.
Right, so. But then presumably you just take a power connection and go cha-chunk.
Yeah,
and you're up and running.
So our power, we're connected by what you'll have seen on kind of caravan hookups, a 16 amp commando socket, and we're going straight into a 3-pin main socket.
But you could presumably tap into, if you're in a more industrial space, or should we call it I suppose industrial is the best phrase. You go into a 32 or a 16 amp block.
Exactly that, yeah.
And obviously, as it stands, we're not drawing very much. We've got some lights. We've got AC built in.
We do.
Which is very nice. And of course, the best thing about it, of course, so far is that the AC is currently off for in here. But we had it on earlier, and there is no AC noise from the built-in unit.
No.
That's all tucked in behind a cupboard door over there, which is really rather nice. But you've also got machine room space, haven't you?
We do, yeah. I mean, one of our first decisions was to not cut a hole in the side of the container. So we thought, how do we get, like an OB truck kind of idea, how do you get an access panel? And we elected to not do that. Instead, we built a kind of bulkhead at the entrance where we can put our air conditioning condenser, and we have above that some rack space from which you can rod cable to all sides and corners of the studio, such that we don't have cables everywhere. Is the idea, because it's much tidier and neater to just know there's a rack area.
Yeah, and of course, if you've got something like one of these lovely AKA desks. Wonder where you got that from. You can obviously have rack space and things built into these anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you've got noisy amplifiers or hot amplifiers, things like that, whack them away inside the cupboard and.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, generally, it's a really nice place to be. It's very kind of got sort of clean lines, I suppose, is the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all very like white and greys and nice. But you know, the thing people want to know about is the acoustics.
Yeah.
Now, this is all kind of lovely, kind of what we know as studio kind of wall stuff, isn't it? But behind here, presumably, there's no just off-the-shelf acoustic treatment. You didn't go to B&Q and buy a job lot of packing foam, presumably.
No, we didn't. Everything that's in here from acoustic treatment point of view, it's all very specifically designed for this space and its characteristics. So we measure, and every time you do anything, you measure again and again. If I hear the one more time, I will not be responsible for my action.
Swept sine wave, do you remember any chance?
How many times? So everything that's built in here from an acoustic treatment point of view was built for here. And there's a certain amount of trial and error as well. So you put something in and you measure. You put something else in and you measure. And then you adjust and tweak. And I think if you're doing acoustic treatment like that, if you put two things in and measure, it doesn't work.
Because you don't know which one had the...
Well, one might have made a huge improvement and one might have been awful.
Change one thing.
So that's just an iterative process that's taken us and our acousticians we've been working with several months, in fact. And as a consequence, there's nothing in here that's off the shelf. It's all specifically for where we are.
But as you explained earlier, it's not just like saying, oh, we've smothered the walls in acoustic treatment.
No.
What's back there is slightly different to what's there, is different to up there. And
exactly,
stuff like that.
yeah.
So there's a lot of, we're going to use words like Helmholtz resonators and, what was the other one? Panel traps, things like that going on in here.
All the tricks.
Without giving away the
Yes.
secret sauce, because quite frankly, it is the secret and it is
some or all of the things that are available to you as acoustic apparatus are employed in this. And I think the trick is, ordinarily when you're treating a room, it's your room. It's got the speakers that you have, and it's the stuff that you work on, and it's what you like. We don't have any of that knowledge ahead of time. So who's working in it? What works for speech-based content on a pair of Genelecs is very different than what works for someone on a pair of PMCs who does Swedish death metal. And what they prefer. So we don't get to know that.
That's probably the way round, though, by the way. The Swedish death metal probably on Genelecs.
Arguably so. It's a Scandi thing. But because we don't get to know that, which is normally your starting point.
Yeah.
What we chose to do was take two fundamental beliefs. One is this concept of being acoustically benign. So there's that old saying that if you can't take the room out of the mix, don't take the mix out of the room.
Yeah.
So the idea was being that the room has no bias and no impact on what you're hearing. So that's the acoustically benign bit. And then we looked for something that you can use as a basis of measurement. So the best thing that we found that was most useful for us was the EBU Tech 3276 paper from I don't know what it was, but it's the paper that gives you the RT60 charts.
Right.
Which tells you really helpfully what's too live and what's too dead across the frequency spectrum. So we could use that as a benchmark and nudge up against too dead and come back a bit. And otherwise you end up, as you said earlier, with a kind of an anechoic type room that's unpleasant and tiring to be in. which is every bit as bad as something that's too reverberant and too live. So we've used that as our kind of our goal, our end product. So I'll give you the RT30 specs, which is the right measurement for a room of this size, but we're right in that channel of righteousness in the EBU.
And it does sound really nice. We had to listen to some tunes, and in the sweet spot, and moving back to what I'm going to call the producer zone, it does sound really nice in here.
Thank you.
And I went, first thing I said was, "Where's the sub?" Because it is a really nice, big sounding space without the big.
Yeah. It's
size.
airy,
yeah,
but it's got the right sort of tightness around it.
Now, of course, I'm going to call it semi-portable because it is a big thing
you
to
can't carry it.
No, you can't stick it in a flight case.
Transportable.
Transportable. Okay. So you're obviously thinking festivals and shoots and film shoots and the hire market for things like that. Mm-hmm. But people can go to conventional studios for that, can't they? Or is this a whole kind of a rebellion almost against what used to be the norm, the Sohoism type thing?
Well, I think that's changing. The conversations we've been having with customers for a couple of decades is that that's changing anyway. Flexibility has been the way to make money. To be able to say yes or hang on, I think we can do that in ways that you hitherto couldn't do. And you're right, there are temporary scenarios like festivals and events where you want to put some creative capacity to work. But actually there's a permanent side to it too. I mean, yes, this could move around every day, should you wish. But there are so many use cases that I can envisage where this wouldn't move from one year to the next. Mm-hmm. In the home studios, for example, if you wanted to put a structure in your back garden, for example, then this is cutting to the chase. This is the end product of a studio build project mm-hmm. where it's done, and that can live in your back garden. Now, the one thing that I keep reading about is how 35-year-olds in this country, and I doubt it's different anywhere much else in the world, but 35-year-olds in this country aren't owning their own houses. And I think
the banks own them, but that's
aren't getting a mortgage on their own houses.
Yeah.
And I think that at 35, if you're doing this for a living, you're going to keep doing this. This isn't a phase.
No.
And at 35, you're at or near the height of your career power, and yet you can't own your own house. So if you're renting and you want to do something at home, then the likelihood is that you won't be able to. Your landlord won't let you modify the house mm-hmm. or convert or build an outbuilding.
And why would you?
Even if you could.
Because it's not your...
it's insane. Because the next day you get a phone call and it turns out they're selling the house.
Yes.
And you've put all that money into that investment. So what we're proposing, I guess, is that as fun as studio build projects are, not everyone wants to do them. They want to get to the guaranteed outcome and just know it's going to work. So that's what we're proposing. And then when you move house, either because you've sold and bought a new one, or you're moving house because you're renting, you move this too. So that undertaking of a studio premises for your work, you do once. And then as you move, it moves.
And I like that because, say, there is that, there was a time when audio post in the UK was done in a particular part of central West London. And that's not the case now because of the Thorntonism that is the cottageisation of the industry. You might have just created the containerisation of the industry.
Well, the irony is that it is being done. It's still being done in that part of town and in the equivalent parts of town in other countries. Everyone has their media districts. And indeed, in the UK, there's other parts of Bristol and Manchester. But increasingly, that's where you want to go and be with a client. And every CEO of every post house has a cloud strategy. And what that means is, how do I get stuff off my premises? How do I get stuff somewhere else when it doesn't have to be here? And this is part of that argument. As
long as you've got one of these days, you can work. And for those of you who can't see, this is a network cable. As long as you can get this into the outside world. And actually, one of the nice features, one of the little details, the fact that this room sounds beautiful is one thing, but the little patch panel on the front, I really like.
Well, you need to connect to
the world.
Exactly.
And let's say the last thing you want to do now is put a hole in it to get your network cable through.
No, don't do that.
No, don't do that. So the little patch connector with MADI and audio
Well, it's
I/O.
modular, isn't it? So you can put fibre in there, you can put MADI, XLRs in there, whatever your choice
network,
of connectivity
whatever,
has to
yeah.
be. Yeah,
Well placed prop, that.
well, thank you. But I think, with talking about the post-production business as well, I mean, a post house or a film lot or a recording studio business is a capacity business. If you ask the boss of any of those companies how's business, they'll generally give you a percentage, a capacity figure. We're at 90% for the next 6 months. Now, their capacity businesses that, when they are quiet, don't work well at all financially. But then things come in cycles and it gets super busy. And when you get beyond 100%, you haven't got the capacity to make the money back that you didn't make when it was quiet.
Absolutely.
That's the kicker. So part of what we're thinking is maybe there's a top level, a top layer, if you like, of capacity that's on demand. So let's say you've got a big thing coming up in August for which you might need more capacity than you have. Rather than that be a commitment to another building or to sub out to a competitor and send the work up the street, maybe there's a way that you can expand to some degree to invoice into the busy bits. And then rather than be left holding the baby of that fixed cost when it disappears, you can contract back to your natural fixed size and just insert some flexibility into that capacity model that is studios, film lots, post houses.
Because obviously you and I come from an audio background, but there's no reason why this couldn't be an Avid editing suite or
No.
Any kind of multimedia production facility could be dropped into this space.
Yeah, well, we've had interest from a couple of companies that want to put a green screen psych in and place this where stories are, so that you have a controllable, isolated environment that you can light and that you can make sure isn't being rained on or blown around. And you can shoot presenter-led content in an environment you can control. So you can drag your presenter out from the rain. You haven't got to do their hair again. You haven't got to hold an umbrella across them. You can just make sure.
Because that always looks so good.
Well, it does.
In the middle of the next Pirates movie.
It's about controlling the environment. This could be on the lawn of the hospital where a royal baby is being born, and you can put presenter talent in here and use it for that reason. Because ultimately, what a studio is an environment that you have controlled and you've nullified and made isolated. So anything where that is helpful, this could be useful. Yeah.
I like the fact that you've really taken the time to get it right, because my late stepfather said one thing, and it's one of those mantras that has been stuck in my head ever since. The only thing you make in a hurry is mistakes.
Yeah, okay.
But
Wise
I also
words. I like
but
that.
I also like the fact, the attention to detail, like there's extra sockets and there's the rodding points. There's even strap points in here, because presumably, obviously, this is all furniture, like can go into any building, and this stuff is not nailed down.
No.
So when you move it, whether you move it complete in situ or whatever, you're going to want to tether this stuff down. So to have strapping points and cargo points, things like that, is all really important. The other thing I really like is the lighting.
Right.
It feels quite a nice place to be. The fact that we've gone for the kind of LED blue at the moment. We could go bright orange, red. It's got LED color LED.
It does, yes.
So it's such a small thing, but actually to be able to change your mood, change your environment to what you're working on or the way you feel is really important.
Well, it's familiar as well, isn't it? We want to put people at their ease, and when they come through the door, to say, "Oh, I know what this is. This is where I play. I'm home. This is a studio, and it looks, feels, sounds, and works like one." And part of that is lighting. Huge part of that.
So, and the other nice thing I like is the outdoors. The bit, the way in, the entrance.
Yeah.
It feels like you're going into something nicer than a shipping container, because you do that big kind of grand reveal thing, and it's like, oh, it's all wooden
Something
and kind of
different going on.
cedary and nice, and it's got a real class feel about it.
Yeah, again, not something I can take credit for. That's really most of that stuff is a Guy Wilson thing, of course. But I think, apart from doing things right, and if you're going to do something, do it as well as you possibly can. Apart from that virtuous part of it, there's a responsibility, I think. If you're going to ask people to bare their soul and do their best work and spend time in a shipping container, I think you've got something of a duty to make it as good or better than what they might otherwise be doing. Mm-hmm. So a big part of that is the initial sort of disarming, hang on a minute, this is different, this isn't a shipping container. And part of it is once you're in here, and you might spend weeks, months, years working in here, it's important that it's somewhere that you can, and not just can, but want to spend time. It's conducive to the job at hand.
I also like the fact that you're not a million miles from the outside world. You have kept a certain amount of natural light in here, with the what's it called, frosted glass doors, things like that.
Vision panel.
Sorry, clearly didn't
too much time looking at doors.
Didn't swallow that one from the IKEA catalogue. But I'm really impressed. I'm really excited for you for the project, because it does tick many boxes, and obviously because it's a shipping container. I'm assuming you could stack them, you could do all sorts of things that you can normally do with containers.
Absolutely.
So if you need 4 in one space, you don't just need 4 in a...
No, indeed.
A space for 4, you can have a spot for 2 and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But I think it's a really cool project. I really like it. Dare we go anywhere near the bottom line number?
Yes. I mean, we haven't finalised exactly what our...
And is it spec dependent? Is it... could I spec it with different colours, for example? Could I spec... How customisable is the current Space Crate? Kind of...
To an extent. I mean, if you think about what the product actually is, ignore all this equipment, because this wouldn't... No.
We are in the product, we're not using the product.
Quite so, yeah. Customisable, I mean, fabric colours and stuff, we could change. Or I'm quite excited to see what customers end up doing. Mm-hmm. So they will receive a Space Crate, and they might decide, you know what, I'm gonna bury this, I'm gonna cover it in cargo netting, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna take this out. I'm really excited to see what people do with it.
The idea of dropping it in the ground is quite cool.
Well, you can bury them, yeah.
Yeah.
If you wish. So what ends up happening to them, I think, is really interesting as well. Customisably...
Because presumably you've been through a lot of that process.
Yeah, I wouldn't change any aspect of it structurally, because this works, and very little else I think will. Cost-wise, we've tried to get to something that equates really well with the alternative, which would be to build something, or even the kind of upper end of the garden shedio type stuff, which I think puts us around 40, 45k pounds to own outright. The difference, of course, being that with this, you do it once.
Yeah.
You don't do a series of 5-year projects where you're doing that kind of money on a building. And the other thing, of course, is that when you do that, I've got a few friends who've converted garages, for example, into studios.
As have I.
Indeed.
Russ has done it. Dan's in the middle of it. I've done the garden shed routine.
And it's not cheap, but when you come to sell, the next owner not only has no interest in a studio, so they're not valuing that in terms of your price.
And actually, it has no value on the property. Any garden outbuilding is only resale interest.
Yeah.
It doesn't show on the price of the property.
No. Well, if anything, what they do want, they'll come to see your converted garage that's now an amazing studio, and they'll come and tell you that, well, what we actually want for this kind of money is a garage.
Yeah.
So then you end up taking all that stuff apart at your expense to put it back to a garage.
Yeah.
And then you move to your new house and you do it all again. And I think it's, when you mentioned some of the guys on the team who've been doing it, and I've been following that with great interest because it's interesting. I've been doing it. But for some people, that studio build project is really rewarding and exciting. And at the end of it, you get to fold your arms and go,
I made that.
I made that, and it's just how I like it. But that's not everyone's experience. Quite often it's a distraction that's somewhat daunting from what they actually want to do every day. To spend time working with contractors, with aircon people, with acousticians, with getting 3 quotes for pouring cement.
And then to realise the guy who's the cheapest is utterly useless.
Generally speaking, and that's why they're the cheapest.
That's a really nice way of putting it.
And it's getting through all that process. And at the end, you don't even know when you set out on that journey whether the end product is something you're going to like. I guess what we're proposing is, have a look. If this is what you want to end up with, then this is what you'll get, because this is going to be replicated in every one that we do. So you get to know before you set out on that journey that the end product is going to be something you like. You get to know if you're renting or you plan to move house, that this can move house with you. And you get to know that from the minute you've made that decision and you want to get a space crate, that for the time between then and it turning up, you can just crack on and go and work and earn money, rather than being sucked into a world of 3 days of looking at acoustic doors on the internet and 6 days of reading about Helmholtz panels and just we've overdone it in terms of the minds that we've baked into this project.
But actually, on economies of scale, you haven't, because if you get it right once, and this is then repeatable, X thousand million, hundreds of thousands of million.
More than that.
Okay.
What's your ambition?
Oh, I'm English. Scale it back. No, I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
We were really intrigued, I think is the best way to describe it. When you originally came up with the idea, we were kind of, that's interesting. You know, that's a really interesting project. Well, I don't think I ever said that out loud.
No, I know you never had a doubt.
Not for a moment. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for showing us around the Space Crate.
Thank you for coming.
Throughout the video, we'll shoot some more B-roll and stuff. So as we've been talking, you'll see all the prettiness and all the stuff we've been talking about. But I wish you every success with it. I look forward to seeing them at the side of the main stage at Glastonbury. And
hopefully so.
And other festivals are available. Well, hope you've enjoyed that. My name's James Ivey, and we will see you again very soon for some more gear talk.